Hello, everybody. Welcome to Terrace Talk ahead of this weekend's crunch Premier League encounter between Norwich and Watford. I'm not sure if we're going to quite put the label on it that you might be putting on it yet. We're going to have a discussion about that, and we'll come back to you in just a second. Delighted to be joined by Norwich City fan Andrew Kent and Watford fan and founder of the Watford Way, James Batchelor, as well. Gents, thank you so much for joining me. Andrew, I'm going to start with you first. I'm going to ask you straight off the bat, both the same question. Is this weekend's game must win? And we'll start with, is this weekend must win for Norwich City?
It's not must win because after the Saturday, there's 33 games left. So there's plenty of points to play for. But you could, as someone recently said, you could put it in the must not lose category. I think in essence, we just need to get points on the board. We don't want to be the team that is sitting on naught across the 92 league clubs for another week. So I think we definitely need to get something out of it. I think the fact that it's at home probably adds a bit more pressure in front of 27,500 at Carrow Road. So yeah, probably must not lose. I'm not going to say must win, but it's a big game. It would be a big game wherever it was played across the season, because I think when you're coming up, you're measuring yourself against the two you come up with first, and then everyone else above you, as they always seem to be above us. But everyone else then in the league, when you're up against them, you're kind of hoping for points. But when you're playing Watford and Brentford as it is this season, you're really wanting to set that stall out to win the game. So it's a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but yeah, probably must not lose.
You should be a football manager, Andrew.
Yeah,
a response like that. We'll ask James the same question then. Is this weekend a must-win for Watford, or would you categorise it in the same way that Andrew has there?
I wouldn't say it's a must-win for Watford as such, but I would say for Xisco and some certain Watford fans, it's a must-win, just because, the dynamic at Watford is, a few bad results and your future is already in question. Now, I really like what Norwich have done with Daniel Farke and sticking with him even through relegation and when times have got tough. But I think for Xisco, he does really need to show that he can be a Premier League manager, because this really is the biggest job he's ever had. Before Watford, he was at Dynamo Tbilisi and he did well there, winning the league with them. But apart from that, he's not really had any previous managerial experience. So I think for Xisco, it's definitely a must-win. For Watford, of course, I'd love to win the game, but I do agree. I think that we can't lose the game, because if we do, Watford especially, end of the year, November time, we've got such a difficult run of fixtures. So between now and kind of the start of November, we really need to pick up quite a few points.
Interesting. Well, Norwich City, Andrew, have just emerged from a very difficult start. 4 games against Liverpool, Man City, Leicester and Arsenal. Welcome back to the Premier League. Thank you very much. They're out of those now. And particularly when you look at the next 5 home games, starting with Watford, there does look to be a patch now, a run of fixtures that certainly in Premier League terms is a bit more favourable, and probably a run of fixtures that Norwich City are targeting more points from. So do you feel like you've seen enough over the last 4 games to suggest that that's going to happen for Norwich City yet? Do you still think there are areas that concern you? Where are you kind of feeling in terms of your outlook on Norwich?
I always like to be positive, but I'm having trouble with these opening 4 games, and not from the point of view of, we should have got something from any of them, because of, yes, they were all really, really tough games against 4 good sides, albeit the last one was against a side who have been woeful for a long time, and that was probably the best opportunity out of the 4 to get points. The issue I have at the moment, I put a tweet out earlier in the week about the change in formation. And I know it's a minor change from 4-2-3-1 to 4-3-3, but I'm struggling to see the benefit. And I put it out there because I was hopeful that one of the many on Twitter who sort of analyse us probably deeper than I would come up with something, even just like a small positive of, yes, this is where this is headed. It just baffles me really that we've gone away from, Farke came in 2017 and was it's 4-2-3-1, and I know he's always said he doesn't go too deep with the base formations, as he would say.
Good impression.
Well, thanks. But he's always been a 4-2-3-1, and then we kind of work off that. So to have a championship season like we had with that formation, and then I'm presuming, as pointed out to me by a couple of people, there's obviously been data analysis in this of 4-3-3 maybe worked better in the Premier League. I don't know. But to take away from what we had and what worked, and certainly what benefited Teemu Pukki, I can't see the guy scoring a goal at this moment in time in the formation that we're in. He looks bereft of confidence. I know he's come off the back of an injury and then the Euros and being rushed into that, and then COVID, and then obviously a massively disjointed pre-season and all those things that have surrounded it. But I think we've kind of taken his legs away by not having a 10 behind him. Now, obviously, we sold his best mate in the summer, which made sense, to be honest, to sell Buendia when we did. But to not have someone then sitting behind him like Cantwell or Dowell or Zolis or Rosita, whoever you kind of want to throw in there to feed him, that's where the formation for me isn't working for us. And I know it takes time to build an attack, but it just seems odd that we've lurched from one to another, and we don't seem to really have the tools to play that formation, particularly in the centre of the pitch and up top.
You make some really interesting points there. I must admit, I'll ask you about the Arsenal game in a moment, but just reflecting on that, it does feel to me like it's almost, there's a slight irony about it, because we spent a lot of 2 years ago saying they haven't quite cracked that number 10 position and maybe they should add another central midfielder, and now they've kind of done that, and it feels like they need a number 10 again. So yeah, I would agree with a lot of the points that you've made. In terms of the Arsenal game, just to very quickly reflect on that, you described it as maybe the best opportunity to get something off Arsenal, certainly in the last half a decade, I would argue, maybe even longer, probably longer than that. It was a 1-0 defeat. For the first 60 minutes, it was a very low margin game. Both teams were in it. Norwich had a really good spell before half time where they were controlling possession, but really, again, we're struggling to create, and we'll probably come back to the creativity point. How do you kind of reflect on that Arsenal game? Disappointment, frustration? Do you take encouragement out of it? Because I think there's probably, you could probably fall in either of those camps, to be completely honest.
I think it was Norwich City in the Premier League in a nutshell. I think these 4 games have shown that in that short space of time, where we've been battered by one of the best teams in the league, one of the best teams in Europe in Man City. We kind of jabbed at Liverpool in the first half, didn't even really land a punch on them, and then got walked over in the second half. Leicester was probably the best performance so far for a sustained spell. And then Saturday, I think, was the most disappointing, because, like I say, Arsenal now aren't Arsenal of, like, say, even 5 years ago, let alone 10 to 15 years ago. So the opportunity was there. We had probably one good chance, I think, from memory, which was McLean's header. And then beyond that, yes, we were in the game, but we could have played until today and we probably wouldn't have scored. So it's all the hallmarks of Norwich City in the Premier League from last time and years gone by. And I think I certainly, and I'm sure a lot of other fans, want to see us move away from that and try and change that pretty quickly to a new Norwich City where we're attacking and we're taking the game of teams and we're getting chances and scoring goals. Obviously, what happens at the back end of the pitch is a different ball game, but it's the attack that's more worrying for me than the defence.
It's interesting. We'll see. Hopefully, a win can just break that cycle a little bit. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of statistics spanning 2 seasons, but it is 14 consecutive Premier League defeats for Norwich City. I think the record is 20, which is held by Sunderland. So you'd hope that we can avoid talking about that for too much longer. James, let's come to you. Watford came up with Norwich City last season. They were probably between Christmas and and maybe the end of the season, I think they registered the most points in the Championship, certainly the most wins under Xisco Munoz. 1 win so far this season, which is on the opening day against Aston Villa, 3 defeats subsequently, Wolves, Tottenham and Brighton. How have they kind of fared in the Premier League so far? I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned straight off the bat about Xisco's future. That would imply that maybe it's not gone as smoothly as perhaps you guys hoped.
No, I think it's a difficult one because Xisco as a person is a really nice guy, but in the games we've seen so far, especially against Tottenham, Wolves actually as well, because I was at them games, it's been quite clear to me that he's been out coached by the opposition, whether that be tactically or even just with substitutions. So I think his inexperience is showing, but I also think that we have taken a calculated risk with him, and personally for me, fans calling for his head now is crazy. I think we've got to stick by him for at least a little bit longer, because ultimately he is a young manager. We've taken a risk with him, and I do overall like the style of play he's trying to implement. I think in the Championship he got away with maybe some questionable decisions at times, just because sometimes having a better quality of player can get you over the line rather than out coaching the opposition, if that makes sense. So I think it's a transition for him from a Championship and winning nearly every game, whereas you're going from that to then the Premier League, where you being a newly promoted side, you're expecting to get dominated on quite a regular basis. So it's interesting actually that you mentioned that Norwich switched to the 4-3-3 formation as well, because that's what Watford predominantly play. So I'm interested to see how that will pan out, and whether both teams will cancel each other out or not. But I think we've done well for the players we've got, but I do want to see a bit more from Xisco. Especially in terms of dominating teams, and hopefully we can start with Norwich on Saturday, because I do think that overall, every opposition preview that every opposition fan that comes on here probably says the same thing as me, but I do think Watford's squad is a lot stronger than Norwich, purely through recruitment. Musa Sissoko, Danny Rose, Josh King, these are experienced Premier League players. So I do think that we've got a good mix, in the Premier League this year. And actually, arguably, I would say we've got a better squad than last time we were in the Premier League. So I do think it's going to be interesting to see how the game pans out, and hopefully Xisco can put any doubts of his future to bed with a win this Saturday.
Well, I was going to say, and you mentioned it there, it's a slight transition, isn't it, from what he was used to in kind of the first, what month did he take over? It was before Christmas, wasn't it?
He took over in December, and his first match was actually Norwich at Vicarage Road.
Yes, I remember, yeah.
I
was there, unfortunately. It was Boxing Day, wasn't it? But as you say, they're probably not a coach who, since he's been at Watford, has been used to losing, and now comes into the game on kind of back-to-back defeats. There's been I've seen some stuff made on social media, and we've spoken about Norwich's lack of creativity. Maybe a similar point to Watford. Is that something that you share, having watched sort of their opening games of the season? Is there kind of a lack of creativity? Are we just seeing, because I think both teams made 11 signings of the summer, are we just still seeing both coaches, and I'll maybe come back to Andrew on this point, just trying to work out what puzzle pieces they've got and trying to put that together effectively?
Yeah, I do. I mean, from a Watford perspective, midfield really is our issue now. That's where we've seen the most incomings and outgoings this summer. Seasoned pros like Will Hughes, Nathaniel Chalobah, even Troy Deeney as striker. We've had really, seasoned English players as well. You always have the English spine in the Premier League, don't you? And these players have left Watford. We've brought in loads and loads of new faces, especially in that midfield area. And we have been lacking creativity from there. Our creativity primarily has come from Ismail Assar. So if you mark him out the game, or he has just a day off, a bad day, it's really difficult for us to make chances. And obviously, from a Norwich perspective, Buendia is a huge miss for you guys. And if you was going to ask me about my key player, it would normally be Buendia. So I think that's a positive for at least for me, for Watford coming up against you guys, that you guys have lost Buendia. But in terms of creating chances, if Ismail Assar is a bad day, or the midfield aren't playing up to scratch, we really do struggle to create even a clear-cut chance per game.
Interesting. Andrew, I've kind of taken and I've been reflecting on Arsenal, and I don't know if this is just a view that I have. Maybe it's me searching for optimism. Maybe it's shared by other people. So this is a good opportunity to find out. Do you get the sense that this is a Norwich team that will grow and will grow as a team and will pick up points eventually? But for me, it just kind of feels like how quickly that happens, because if it happens in a month, happy days, that may be enough to get enough points to keep them up. If it happens at December, then that's going to be probably a little bit too late, isn't it? So do you feel there are reasons to be optimistic for Norwich City fans at the moment? I mean, we're 4 games in. It's been a very difficult start to the season. I think if most Norwich fans were being true to themselves, they'd probably have them on the amount of points that they have at the moment, maybe 1 or 2 if they were being maybe slightly optimistic. How is that kind of a fair reflection? Do you think this is a team that will grow? Or I guess it's kind of the wider point is about how these defeats affect them, because in the Premier League, confidence can drain out so quickly.
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from, and I'm inclined to agree. I haven't seen enough to suggest that it'll happen immediately. I'd love it to be Saturday. James has just mentioned, obviously, their midfield and their formation. I wonder if Farke might revert back now that Norman's had a full week. I wonder if he would play as part of a 2, and then we'd play the 3 and the 1 ahead of that. I think Rashica, and Zolis have shown in flashes what they can do. It does take time, to those we said earlier, to get an attack to work and to gel, especially when you're changing up what you've done with the guy that is the kind of linchpin of that with Pukki, and like I say, taking Wendyr away and trying to kind of reinvent it. So there have been flashes, but it's only been flashes. And yes, the first 4 games, the majority of us expected to pick up nothing. Certainly when the fixture list came out, I think as the games have gone on, obviously as we got to Arsenal, I think maybe people thought, there's a chance we'll sneak a win, maybe get a point. Leicester being at home, there's always the element of war at Carrow Road, so we could well do something away in the Premier League. I think we pretty much write ourselves off more often than not anyway. So it needs to change. But yeah, I think there could well be optimism in there, but it's how quickly they can sort of knit it all together. If he does continue and persevere with his 4-3-3, then I think it will have to gel pretty quickly, because I don't think fans will back it too long if it's not working, because of the reasons we've said before. So it's got to happen Saturday, or we should get rid of him and get Houghton in.
Oh goodness!
No,
me.
Absolutely not. I'd rather my 4-year-old son manages.
Oh well, he has left Nottingham Forest now, hasn't he? So who knows? It's really interesting, just the kind of mood ahead of this weekend. It does feel like if either a team are on the receiving end of a defeat, then the mood amongst that particular fan base is going to be pretty grim for the next week. So we shall see. Just to come back to Andrew, Daniel Farke has had 200 games now in charge of Norwich City, 201 this weekend, 4 against Watford, 4 defeats. We're trying to be optimistic, but this does seem to be a team that Daniel Farke struggles against for whatever reason.
I'll leave this up to the powers that be along come Norwich, but I'm not sure if there's some sort of reverse along come Norwich that happens. So there might be a spreadsheet coming out on Twitter in the next day or 2 to tell us what likelihood of a win there is. Just to explain to James, a manager can do more than half a season. So Daniel Farke has managed to do, he's now in his 5th season, which I know is unbelievable from your point of view, but that can happen. He's deserved the time that he's got. I think obviously the first season was such a transition, and there was a lot of trust the process talk, and people held on. And then we had the incredible scenes of 18-19, which nobody saw coming. Obviously, 18-19 turned into 19-20, which then was very, very tough. But I think the reasons that we went down weren't Farke-based injuries, lack of recruitment, that sort of stuff. And as Stuart Webber said, we went to war without a gun. So walking the championship last season as we pretty much did in the end, getting near 100 points, to hit 200 games now is fantastic, because as we're seeing, Houghton's lasting 7 games into a championship season. Watford changed managers like I changed my underpants, and there's other clubs that would just knee jerk every single time. And I think we're kind of showing what can be done if you give someone some time. But as is proven, there's no time in football. It's if you don't get a result tomorrow, you're out the door the next day.
Yeah, but I mean, we jest about kind of Watford and how frequently they change managers, James. But it has worked for them, hasn't it, in recent seasons? I mean, you get rid of Vlad Ivic, in comes Xisco Munoz, and suddenly you're back in the Premier League. So people may look at that approach and joke about it, but it's one that's proved on the whole successful for Watford over the last however long.
Yeah, I would say so. You've got to remember we got 2 FA Cup semi-finals as well, an FA Cup final. Before our relegation, that was our 5th year consecutively in the Premier League. So up until that relegation season, it did work. And, I had a great time in the Premier League, growing up through my teenage years, watching Premier League football, it was absolutely amazing. And yeah, I know a lot of opposition fans, including Andrew, question the decision of the Watford board. And, as we said earlier, I wouldn't be surprised to see, Xisco go. I think he'll go before Christmas, which I don't want. For me personally, even if we got relegated, I would keep Xisco and let him do what you've done with Daniel Farke, bring us back up, and develop the squad he's got, because it's quite evident to me that the way we've recruited this summer, especially. Yes, we've brought in some experienced Premier League players, but we've brought in loads and loads of youngsters, really, really promising youngsters, where if we do get relegated, these players can come into the team and we'll still have a really, really strong squad in the Championship. So, I do think we have to back Xisco. And as we said earlier, we can't come into the Premier League and expect to beat every team we come across. We can't expect to draw every game that we play. We've got to take it on a game-by-game basis. And, November especially, if I list you off the fixtures we've got. Now, I know you've got to play everybody twice, but the actual run of games we've got in November is absolutely ridiculous. So we've got Arsenal, relegation favourites for you guys. Then we've got Chelsea, then we've got Leicester, then we've got Man City, and then we've got who else have we got? We've got another team after that. It's just absolutely insane. So from like the middle of October to the end of November, I can't see us picking up a single point, which is why this is important, because you guys, us Norwich, Newcastle, Burnley, these teams that Watford are going to play within the next month or so, they're the teams that are going to be around us come the end of the season. So it is important that we don't lose the game, but we really do need to get a positive result. And yeah, as I keep saying, I really do hope it starts on Saturday. I'm very positive. I'm very positive. So I do think the squad we've got is better than you guys.
Have you seen enough so far from Watford to suggest that the results will come? I know you've kind of mentioned Xisco's position a little bit, but have you seen enough from kind of the opening? I mean, you've done something that Norwich haven't done yet, which is win a game.
Yes.
But obviously the defeats haven't been particularly great. Not scored a goal in that time either. So have you seen enough to suggest that kind of the positive results are on the way for Watford?
To be honest, I haven't really seen enough to suggest that positive results are on the way. However, the manner of the defeats and how they happened has more been through individual mistakes by certain players rather than tactical decisions, if you will. For example, against Tottenham, that was purely a goalkeeping error. If that didn't happen, I would have expected us to draw that game. Wolves, again, individual mistakes, really. Brighton, poor pass out from the back, Brighton player through on goal, scores. So really, a lot of the goals we've conceded have come from individual mistakes. And maybe if they hadn't happened, Watford might have 1 or 2 more points than we've got currently. So, there is positives there that we've not been torn apart by any team, really. And Tottenham probably has been the best performance I've seen so far, other than the Aston Villa game. So it's kind of a mix of both. We've not really done enough to win the games we've played since Aston Villa, but equally, I don't think we've really deserved to lose all of them either. So yeah, I'm kind of sitting on the fence with that one. I do think, coming up against Norwich, I do expect us to beat you. But that could just be with my championship head on, thinking we're in the championship and we've won 10 games in a row. So yeah, it's very, very interesting, and I've kind of still got to readjust to being back in the Premier League, and yeah, like we're the underdog. We're like the little guys now, and we've got all these big teams above us who really should be running away with it.
Yeah, you get used to it pretty quickly. Don't worry. Certainly from a Norwich perspective, I think that we've certainly from a Norwich perspective had to experience that in recent seasons. Andrew, I think if we look back to the two Watford games last season, James has already mentioned him. Ismaila Sarr was very, very good in both. I think he gave Jacob Sorensen and Xavi Quintilla a lot of problems. Brandon Williams was very good last weekend at Arsenal. Probably the one Norwich player who really did impress, and probably the one Norwich player that you looked at and thought actually probably didn't deserve to be on the losing side last weekend, defending against Nicolas Pepe very, very well. He's a £70 million winger by all accounts. Does that give you a bit more confidence that Norwich can control Ismaila Sarr this weekend? And given what James said earlier about if you kind of stop him, then maybe Watford lack a little bit of creativity themselves. Does that kind of give you confidence, especially given his performance last week?
It does. I thought he was really, really good. He looked like a Man United player. That's the best compliment you can pay him, is that obviously he's come on loan to us because they want him to get extended game time in the Premier League, and then obviously go back to them sort of ready to challenge Luke Shaw or Wan-Bissaka on the other side, depending on which side he plays. And I think that's a big benefit to him, is the fact that he can play both sides comfortably. Obviously he's a right foot player, but he's a smashing left back. I think where us as fans really liked his performance is he doesn't hold back in a tackle. I wouldn't be surprised to see him whack through Sarr on several occasions on Saturday and probably pick up a yellow card. I think it'll be an interesting battle. But if Williams plays like he did on Saturday against Arsenal, then Sarr might be in for a really, really tricky afternoon, because I don't think Williams is one to back down from the fight. And if he gets beaten by Sarr the first time, he's not going to hold back the second time. So yeah, he's probably been the one bright spot from Saturday where you could go, yeah, there's a real player there. I think there was a little bit of doubt when we were linked with him and then eventually signed him. It took a while to get the signing across the line, but there was a few sort of naysayers on Twitter saying, "Oh, we don't really need him, and what's the point in bringing him in? He's just going to sit on the bench." And obviously, everyone had seen how well Giannoulis had performed in the Championship at the back end of last season. But I was pleased that we signed him, because we need a cover on the both sides, which he gives us, and also I think we've now started to show that we're not going to be sentimental to players who have got us up. Certainly, like last time where we went, no, we'll go with what we had. Giannoulis is a superb player and probably will play a big part in the season as we move along. If there's injuries to Williams, or if Aarons gets injured and we have to move him across, or if Rio gets a move for Max across to a bigger club in January, which seems to be on the cards. So yeah, I'm really excited about him. I'm in a fortunate position. One of my closest friends is a big Man United fan. I messaged him sort of when there was talk of Williams coming in. I said, what are we getting here? And he was like, he's very, very good, but he's very raw, and he just needs that time because of who he's got in front of him. Obviously, he's got England's left back on one side, and then a very, very good right back in Wan-Bissaka, who probably, if there wasn't 45 other right backs that could play for England, Wan-Bissaka would probably be in as well. So he's got to wait his turn, but I think he's going to show us some real positive signs this season.
Yeah, I thought he was excellent. 4 or 5 challenges on Nicolas Pepe last week, both inside and outside the box were excellent. There's one in particular just before half time where he almost seemed to defy physics and get a leg in front of Pepe when he was running behind him to win the ball so clean. It was excellent. Very quite an old school fullback, really, in the way that he tackles, but very good to see. Just finally, Andrew, before we come on to respective score predictions and how you both see this game going, let's ask you about Norwich City's attack, because that seems to be at the moment where there's most concern about, and rightly so. I did a bit of a dig in the numbers at the start of the week, which probably tell a picture of maybe not, this isn't a Teemu Pukki problem, it's probably a more structural point. And as you mentioned, there's lots of new pieces that are trying to come together, and there probably is a lack of cohesion. But how do this? I'm probably asking you $1 million question here, really. But how do Norwich solve their lack of creativity? Is that something that they can change just by switching personnel? Is it something that needs to be sort of coached out of them? How do you kind of see them fixing that issue? The big question, I suppose.
With my as a cup winning under 16s coach, I'll put my coach's hat on and tell you that it is going to be a hell of a lot of work on the training ground. And I would imagine that this week there has been, and even in the preceding weeks, but certainly this week with the full squad available, there will be a hell of a lot of work going on the patterns of play and kind of the snippets we see from the videos the media guys put out. Tend to be a lot of sort of crossing and finishing that we see on a Thursday night or a Friday morning whenever they throw it out. But I would tell you now they do a hell of a lot more work on the patterns of play. For me, it's interesting. Obviously, he doesn't know his best 11 yet. I think that's clear to see. Within that, then, he doesn't know his best attacking 3 or 4, however he's setting up. I think we've seen enough from Zolis and Rashica to suggest that they would play left and right. Pukki is the number 1, but is Sargent kind of knocking at the door sufficiently enough to get a start? Will he start ahead of Pukki on Saturday? I don't know. I don't think so. I would expect him more to start against Liverpool in the Cup on the Tuesday. Ida's put himself out there. He's had a decent pre-season. He's obviously started for Ireland a couple of times. Hasn't got his goal, unfortunately, but I think there's definitely a player in there. So, like I say, it's knitting it all together. I think we'll find that cohesion eventually. I really want to see us go back to the 4-2-3-1 and get Cantwell in as a 10. I think Cantwell and Pukki have a link, not to the level of he who left for Aston Villa and Pukki, but certainly there's a link there. We've seen a through ball from Cantwell against Liverpool to Pukki. That was the sort of one good chance really Pukki's had, I think, in the 4 games from memory anyway. And that kind of showed Todd's got the link with Teemu. So if you played Todd in the 10 and had the other 2 guys wide, I mean, they both bring pace and ability to beat a man. I think that would work. But if he's going to persevere with a 4-3-3 and have Norman, Lees-Malou, Gilmore or McLean as a 3, then I think it's going to be harder and possibly take a bit longer. Although I'm heartened by the fact that James says they're making individual mistakes, because maybe they might gift us something and that might spark something. But also on the flip side of that, with the way that we've been playing out from the back and the kind of issues we're having there, and maybe teams are wise to how Krul wants to chip it wide to Aarons or to Williams and the press in there. I think there's obviously mistakes in us as well. So it could make for a comical game.
Yeah, James, you referenced that game on Boxing Day that Norwich City lost, and I remember Watford being absolutely relentless in their press that time around. So if it's anything similar, I think Andrew's right. Then Norwich may have to look for a I don't want to use the term Plan B, but maybe a different solution to how they play. Let's start with you then, James. This weekend with your Watford hat on, you've already said that you think Watford have a better squad. You're hopeful that they can beat Norwich this weekend. So how do you see the game going? Do you see it being quite a tight affair? Do you think Watford's quality will come through? How do you see it?
I don't think we'll keep a clean sheet. Now, we've not kept a clean sheet all season, which you might think is surprising because obviously, we had the best defence in the Championship last year. But I don't think we'll keep a clean sheet. I do think that you guys will score. But I am confident, as you just mentioned, Connor. I'm very, very optimistic. I do think that we do overall have a better, more experienced squad than you guys. I do think you'll score. What shall I go with? I'm going to go with a 2-1 Watford win. João Pedro coming back from injury as well. Hopefully we'll get to see him too. So, we don't really have a lot of injury problems either. So a lot of our, a lot of the players we want to be available are available. So we've not got to worry too much about that either. So, with João Pedro coming back, hopefully Sark can get back into form. Josh King still yet to score his first goal for Watford. So yeah, 2-1 win to Watford for me. Good
stuff. Andrew, I'll come to you. How do you see this one going?
I'll be brutally honest, Connor, I haven't got a clue. There's so many question marks around us at the moment. And if we continue where we've come from, then unless, like James says, Watford don't keep a clean sheet and gift us a goal, then I can't really see it scoring, and it's horrible to say, and I've never thought that about Norwich, but I'm heartened by what James is saying about how they gift goals. I'll throw you two predictions. If he goes with the 4-3-3 that we've had, I think, and we match them up, I think they might have a bit too much for us, and it'd probably end up a draw, maybe a 1-1. I think if he goes back to the 4-2-3-1 and we've worked on it during the week, and he's basically told them, go out and play like Norwich from last season, but in the Premier League, something will knit together. Watford will gift us an early goal. The mood at Carrow Road will be great. Everyone's bringing their scarves for the ACN painted yellow cause. So I think that would be huge, although it's up against Watford, so we're painting it yellow for the opposition team as well. But if he goes 4-2-3-1, I think we could win 3-1. I don't see us keeping a clean sheet. I don't think we'll keep a clean sheet all season. But
you don't think you'll keep a clean sheet all season?
James, this is Norwich in the Premier League. We ship goals. We can bring in like prime John Terry and the Mandy Vidic with the leg goals in. So.
Interesting stuff. You've both gone for wins, which I like. So let's see where we end up on Saturday. This is a really interesting encounter, I think, for both sides, as we've kind of painted. Maybe not in must-win category yet, but certainly must not lose for either side. Whether that means we'll get a tense affair where they both cancel each other out, we shall see. But it's going to be interesting nonetheless. James, Andrew, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you all very much for watching. Let us know how you think this game's going to go as well in the comments. Hopefully, if you're watching this with a Norwich City hat on, you're feeling a bit more positive. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next week.